Chapter 10 Traitor. Stokes was feeling sicker than ever. His stomach ached with cramp every time he took a breath. It had been easy enough for Romana to trick the Ogron guard at the entrance of the ship to let them pass back into the deserted corridors. Pierpoint had led the way to the stairs and was now, rather irritatingly, striding up them. Amazing for a fellow of his age, Stokes supposed. Unnatural, in fact, tearing about like that. He stopped at a junction.
"Please," he wheezed. "I have to rest. I was not built for speed."
Romana turned. "If you want to wait here, you can always follow us on," she suggested sweetly.
"Oh, you are wicked," Stokes said. "This whole business is more than I can bear. When it's all finished, I shall seek reparations, you know."
He looked up the stairwell at Pierpoint, who stood, waiting impatiently on the next landing.
"This station was supposed to be totally secure. What a shambles! I expect compensation for this inconvenience, Pierpoint. The destruction of my life's work, wrongful arrest, invasion by big hairy aliens. I don't feel very secure after that, I can assure you."
"We have to move on," Romana reminded him. "There may be—" She was interrupted by a cry from Pierpoint as an Ogron appeared at the top of the stairs. The old judge leapt forward, angled his rifle up at the creature, and fired 3 times into its chest. The charges blew the Ogron apart. Its death scream merged with the zing of the energy bolts that killed it. Romana hurried up to join Pierpoint.
"I'm going on," he told her bluntly. "I can't spare any more time on you or Stokes. My duty comes first."
He stepped over the body of the Ogron and hurried up the last flight of stairs that led to level 9. Stokes joined Romana as she looked down at the remains of the Ogron. "Enthusiastic, isn't he?" she said.
"I never trusted him," Stokes said. "I always used to say that he was the creepiest character aboard this tub. Shifty eyes, and you can never tell what he's thinking."
"Let's get after him," said Romana. The doctor called on the last reserves of his strength as the force beam tightened its grip on his body. He shouted up at Zeus.
"Stop this! I've already said I'll answer your questions."
The agony lessened. He opened his eyes and saw a blurred vision of Zeus and her Ogron slave. His legs were cramped and shooting with pain. The bones inside felt as if they had been stretched an inch or two. His fingers had lost their grip on the rests of the chair and flopped helplessly. "That level of pain should kill a normal," Zeus observed as she came closer, lifting up his head. "There is something different about you. What should I have to do to finish you off, I wonder?" For once, the doctor, exhausted, was unable to think of a reply. He slumped back in the chair and said weakly,
"What has driven you to this sadism, Zeus? This senseless hatred? Can't you see its inevitable end? Your own destruction?"
He stared at the eyes behind the mask.
"Tell me, would that really satisfy you?"
"My destruction? Oh no, Doctor. That day will never come. I have elevated myself above the mortal plane. When this body is exhausted, I shall take others. I shall endure until the skull of the last normal rests on a sea of guts and bones."
"I doubt that, Zeus," the doctor taunted. "Yes, that mask trick of yours is very clever, but a strike of planetary missiles would make short work of it."
"Empty threats, Doctor. Soon I will be able to brush off your planetary missiles as easily as I swat an insect. I will be able to stand at the center of a sun as it ignites and survive." The doctor shook his head.
"No, that is not possible, Zeus. You are a deluded sadist. You cannot justify your actions."
He let his eyes close again. He needed to prepare himself for the next wave of agony. He heard Zeus gasp. He opened his eyes and saw her standing back from him. One of her hands had raised itself to the mask in a jerky movement that belonged to Margo. "I am—" The doctor strained forward in his bonds.
"You are Margo," he urged her. "You can fight her off. I will help you. Concentrate."
The masked face slumped. "No," said Margo's voice. She has nearly destroyed me. But there is something I can do. She lurched over to the control panel and pressed a button. The bond securing the doctor to the chair snapped open. The last of the large boulders blocking the way to the TARDIS was being chiseled away by the concentrated laser power of K9's nose ray. He reported to Spigot,
"Instructions completed. TARDIS is now ready for entry."
The rock dust settled in the pink afterglow of the laser beam, and Spigot saw the blue door of the TARDIS for the first time. His face fell. "What the flamin' heck do you call that?"
"Vehicles known as TARDIS.
said K9.
Time and relative dimensions in space."
Spigot sighed. "There's hardly room to swing a cat in there,"
"Negative.
said K9.
TARDIS contains sufficient area for centrifugal tests on V-lines."
He darted forward, and his sensors quivered with indecision.
"There is a conflict in my programming. Orders were to return to TARDIS, but the Doctor, Master, and Mistress Romana may be in danger, and it is my function to assist."
He clicked and whirred.
"I will return to TARDIS and wait."
"I wouldn't hold out much hope for them, K9, said Spigot. He looked back down the tunnel towards the main body of the station. "If you tangle with the Nisbet boys head on, you can only get creamed sooner or later. No, I've got a much better idea." He started off. K9 turned at the door of the TARDIS.
"Wait. What is the nature of your plan?"
Spigot looked back. "And why should it concern you, eh?" K9 trundled forward.
"All information is useful."
Spigot laughed. The thing had emotions, or programmed responses that simulated them. "I get it. You're curious, aren't you?"
"Negative. I am not programmed for curiosity. Your input is required."
Spigot was pleased that somebody was paying attention to him again, particularly now that he'd worked out a plan. "Right, well, you see, what everyone's forgotten about are the engines. Throw a spanner in the works down there, and their business, whatever it is, will be well and truly scuppered." He stood up and set off for the hole in the wall to the cavern. K9 called,
"This plan is inadvisable. Your technical knowledge is limited. You will wait here with me."
Spigot walked away. He heard the robot's motors whirring as it followed him. The long stone corridor adjacent to the courtrooms of Level 9 was deserted. Romana led the panting Stokes at a brisk pace to the door that led to the judge's chambers and Pierpoint's office. As soon as the door was closed safely behind them, Stokes collapsed into one of the big leather chairs.
"Finally! Now may I suggest we hold on here for a while at least?"
Pierpoint was standing by a covered figure of Liberty on the other side of the office. The top had swung open, and he was fiddling with some concealed controls inside. The weapon he had taken was still gripped tightly in one hand.
"Please be silent. I have to concentrate. This sequence is complex."
Stokes snorted.
"And I thought he was getting us a drink."
He peered at the locked drinks cabinet opposite the desk.
"I say."
Romana wandered over to the window and looked out. A small, dirty blue globe was appearing in the stars. "We're nearing a planet." Pierpoint finished his work and stepped back from the globe. The hatch swung shut.
"The signal has been sent,"
he said evenly as he made for the door.
"You two, stay here."
Romana turned. "Where are you going?"
"That is not your concern," Pierpoint said. "You are going to stay here."
He slipped out of the door and closed it. Bolts clicked over automatically.
"He's locked us in,"
Stokes said unhelpfully. "I know," Romana shouted. She thumped on the thick wooden door with a gloved fist. "What is he doing out there?" Stokes sniffed.
"What does it matter, my dear? We're alone, but at least we are together. And,"
he ran his fingers around the clear panel of the drinks cabinet,
"I can see some interesting things in there."
He pulled open a drawer of the desk and searched through the papers and files inside.
"The key has to be somewhere in here."
Romana closed the drawer. "That's very bad manners, and you'd never get it open." She indicated a mechanism built into the top of the drinks cabinet. "It's sealed by a personal recognition code, like the door. We're trapped. What is Pierpoint doing?" Stokes sank back into his chair.
"Well, my pet, we must look for positive aspects to our predicament. We are alone and untroubled.
He patted his lap and raised an eyebrow.
I suppose you think an older fellow like me is past his prime, don't you?
You've been telling me that for several hours, Romana said, patiently. He blew out his cheeks.
Oh, don't listen to me.
I wasn't, said Romana. She started to look around the office.
No, said Stokes. I meant that although I may not be suited to yomping up endless corridors and stairs, there are certain physical activities that I consider myself to excel in.
That planet is coming awfully close, Romana said from the porthole. It must be Planet 11.
You are cruel, Stokes accused. One could be forgiven for thinking you weren't human.
She turned to regard him. That's the nicest thing you've said all day. In the silence that followed her rebuke, Stokes heard a hissing noise. A thin trail of yellow vapor was pouring from a nozzle in the globe. The vapor collected in a thick yellow cloud and began to catch at their throats.
That old scratcher!
Gasped Stokes as he toppled from his chair.
He's trying to poison us!
He fell to the carpet, his big nose bumping the deep green pile. Romana knew she had more time left. Her respiratory bypass would save her from the effects of the gas, but would leave her as unconscious as Stokes. The moments she had would be best employed searching for a way to turn off the gas. She staggered into the gas cloud and stretched out her hands to the globe. The surface was smooth and unyielding. Her grip loosened as the vapor took its hold upon her. Her hearts pumped as if they were about to burst out of her chest. She let herself fall to the floor of the office. The gas continued to seep from the globe over her body and that of Stokes. The doctor raised his hand. His muscles creaked with the pain of the torture. His fingers touched the edge of the Zeus mask. He pulled. The mask did not yield.
It somehow melded itself to your skin,
he told Margo. He was unable to keep the horror he felt from his voice. I know, she said. Her body trembled with the effort it took to keep Zeus suppressed. Please, Doctor, go. I cannot hold her. The doctor glanced at the door of the chamber and ran his tongue over his top lip.
There are things I must know, he said. Try to concentrate. The more I know, the more I can do to help you.
There is nothing you can do, said Margo from behind the mask. This is my face now. She has taken complete control. He steered her gently towards the chair and pushed her into it.
Tell me how she took control. Tell me about her plans, Margo.
I saw her executed, Margo began. She sat in this chair, a shield about her head, screaming her defiance. Even then, I felt something, as if a part of myself was dying. I can see into her mind now, see how it was done. I know all that she knows. Many years ago, she carried out tests using the powers she controls to estimate the resistance of certain substances. She realized that Helicon, in its liquid state, reacted uniquely. She moaned and writhed in the doctor's grip. It can record her mind, Doctor. Exactly. Emotions, memories, personality. The small amount she had was not enough. She planned to mine a vast amount of Helicon from Planet 11.
The doctor frowned. How was she to know it was there?
Margo's hands gripped at the rests of the chair, the knuckles whitening. Her contact with the establishment told her. Pierpoint! A bewildering flurry of thoughts flashed through the doctor's mind.
This is the point, he said, where I feel I ought to say, goodness, I should have realized.
Zeus worked with Pierpoint. He arranged for her to destroy his enemies or enterprises that threatened his own investments. He used her as a walking weapon. She used him to satisfy her own hatred of humanity. They were planning to mine the Helicon together when she was arrested, and together they worked out how to use Stokes and his gallery to recreate her.
How does the process work?
Margo struggled with the concepts in Zeus's mind. The transfer process is achieved by Zeus releasing a quantity of her power into a quantity of liquid Helicon. The Helicon is primed. It becomes almost alive. She can then fill it with her mind and her purpose. The more helicon, the quicker and easier the process. She was in contact with the small amount used to make the mask for only 15 minutes. As a result, she estimated the transfer of her soul into the mask could take up to 5 years. I remember. She can remember lying back as Stokes took the mask. Then it lay dormant in the gallery, gathering strength, seeking a suitable host. It chose me. It amused her to select the woman who would put her to death. The doctor sensed Margo's bitterness in her next words. And somehow, Pierpoint knew. He could see it in my eyes as Zeus took hold of me. But, she chuckled, he didn't know what she was planning as she took control of me. She forced me to steal a transmitter from stores. This was to signal the accomplices she had already briefed before her arrest. Accomplices he knew nothing of.
What about the raid on the survey base?
Yes, through my eyes, Zeus saw reports of the survey on Planet 11. She was afraid that McConaughey Mining would commit themselves to mining the planet before her. One night she summoned up all her energy to take control of my mind. Using my body, she transmatted herself to the survey base, killed their engineer, and switched off the life support systems. Back at the Rock, she used her technical skills to falsify the transmat records and introduced a creeping virus into the security system to prevent her signals to the Nisbets being detected. Then, when she was ready, she took full control and let them in. Margo twisted and shook as Zeus struggled to return. Please, Doctor, you must go. She will consume me. Help me. The doctor made for the door and turned as something occurred to him.
I must know one more thing, Margo. Tell me, what does Zeus intend to do with the helicon when she has it?
She wants to activate it using my mind as hers, said Margo. The mask may soon be independent. Her power over it is growing, but she still needs the mind of a living host to bring the helicon to life. When she has transferred herself, her power will be terrifying.
But what will she do with that power?
The question triggered a series of spasms. Margo gasped as the voice of Zeus choked at her throat. I will replicate myself 1,000,000 times, Doctor, she cried. I will be immortal, untouchable. An army of me will sweep through the universe. I will destroy all normals. Her head jerked up, and he saw the eye sockets of the mask start to glow with a deadly fire. He threw himself through the door and keyed in the locking command on the panel beside it. Then he hurried through the cells as quickly as he could. Zeus rose from the chair, her host body quivering with anger. She searched her thoughts for the mind of Margo, but it was gone finally, consumed in the pool of her consciousness. Still, what did it matter if she had freed the doctor? He was one normal, and would perish soon enough. No, she warned herself. As a police agent, the doctor was dangerous. If he was able to escape from the Rock and reveal his findings to his superiors, her plan could be in danger. A strike of planetary missiles could destroy 11 and the prize it held for her. The doctor had to be found and killed as soon as possible. The Nisbets had detailed a couple of Ogrons to stand guard at the entrance to the huge cavern where the Rock's mighty engines were located. The 8 beasts stood before the enormous middle door at the far end of level 2, their weapons raised.
We will soon be rich, Master Say,
remarked one of the Ogrons.
Yes, I will buy necklace for wife,
said his mate.
And a big stone.
The first Ogron grunted his encouragement.
Yes, it is good to have a big stone.
Spigot watched them from the cover of a large container of spare parts on the other side of the hallway. On their journey through the corridors, he and K9 had managed to dodge the Ogron patrols, but this situation was different. How the heck are we going to get in there? Spigot looked across the Ogron's thick protective jerkins and then down at his blaster.
Your concern is unnecessary. I will incapacitate these hostiles.
K9 extended his nose laser and moved from cover. Spigot caught his breath as the robot dog went into the open. He looked rather helpless and pathetic as his noisy motor carried him slowly toward the huge Ogron guards and their fearsome blaster rifles. Spigot almost couldn't bear to look. K9 didn't stand a chance. The first Ogron stepped forward suspiciously.
What is this machine?
The second scratched his head.
Is it a robot?
K9 fired a twin beam. The bright red stun ray sliced through the cold air with a high-pitched buzz. The Ogrons fell after a couple of seconds. Spigot emerged. Well done! He looked down at K9. Who put you together, eh? The Force could do with some like you.
Queries irrelevant.
K9 turned up the power of his ray and blasted the locking mechanism of the metal doors. They slid open.
The engine room is now clear.
He went in. Spigot followed and found himself in a surprisingly small room that contained a dead engineer, a large and intricately labeled console, and a screen that displayed the rock's present position in the system. Planet 11 was now less than an hour away. K9 was examining the console. It looked to Spigot as if he was sniffing at it with his antenna.
Engine system based on primitive fission reaction.
He said disapprovingly.
Motor guidance uses hydraulics. Suggest disabling guidance unit.
Oh, decided to help me now then, have you? Said Spigot. He flexed his fingers and reached for a bank of console controls. Now, these must be for the guidance unit.
Halt!
K9 ordered.
My sensors indicate that the console is protected by security devices.
Spigot withdrew his hand. Then how are we going to break into it?
Remove the inspection panel in the base.
K9 ordered. Spigot knelt down and with some difficulty unhooked the metal sheet from the foot of the console. A network of rods and tubes was revealed. Each was labeled a different color.
I am not familiar with these color codings,
K9 admitted.
but logic circuits indicate that the mechanisms serving the guidance systems are those to the left.
Spigot nodded. Right. And are they safe to touch?
Negative.
Replied K9.
I will use my defensive laser to sever the connections.
He started to cut away at one of the rods.
Estimate components will be destroyed in 13 minutes, 4 seconds.
One of the several disadvantages faced by employers of Ogrons is that their servants are similar in appearance. It is difficult for non-Ogrons to tell Ogrons apart. When two Ogrons shuffled fearfully into computer control, Eddie mistook them for a couple he had sent on another errand. "Hello, boys. Brought us breakfast, then?" The Ogrons looked guiltily at the floor.
No, master. You did not give us orders to fetch breakfast.
Eddie frowned. Oh, right. You must be the lads that were on duty back at the ship. We sent the relief guard. Shouldn't you be on patrol? Charlie looked up from the book he had been reading. It was one of his books about classy works of art that Eddie couldn't understand. Charlie had always had fancy tastes. What's going on? The first Ogron looked as if he was about to wet his underpants.
Sorry, master, but we lose prisoner, the judgeman.
Charlie slipped his bookmark gently between the pages of his book and rested it on the console. What have you done?
Ugly girl, come to ship,
said the Ogron.
She said she was Zeus, your friend. Said you would punish if we did not let her in with Big Bold Man. They take Judgeman away.
The second Ogron said boldly,
They knocked me on head and I...
His explanation faltered as Charlie's stare bored into his primitive fear sensors. What ugly girl? Asked Charlie. All the people here are supposed to be dead. Eddie spoke up. Perhaps we missed some, Charlie. Charlie clenched his jaw and spoke very quietly. I do not like this. I do not like it at all. I look at this operation, and do you know what word enters my mind? Slipshod. I am not accustomed to a lackluster standard of work. He addressed the first Ogron. What's your name?
It is Flock, Mr. Charles, your pilot.
Flock. Charlie clamped a hand on the Ogron's shaking shoulder. If anyone says they are one of our friends and that they have our best interests at heart and must be allowed through, do you know what to do? Flark shook his head.
You kill 'em, Flark, because we haven't got any friends. No one has our best interests at heart. In fact, everybody hates us. Got that?
Flark nodded.
Everybody hates you.
That's right. Do you hate us, Flark?
Flark floundered.
No, Mr. Charles. I like you. You are good to Ogrons.
Charlie leant closer and whispered.
Wrong, Flark. You hate us. We don't give you enough food, do we? Or enough room to sleep in. And your beer is warm and recycled from your own urine, isn't it?
I hate you, Mr. Charles,
Flark said dutifully, although Eddie knew that the Ogrons were pleased enough with their lot. Charlie crossed to the station's public address system and pressed a button.
This is Mr. Nisbet Sr. to all Ogrons. There are humans aboard this station. You are to search them out and shoot on sight. And get it right this time. Oh, and by the way, rations are halved until further notice.
He was about to break the link when something occurred to him.
And would Miss Zayas please return to computer control as we are nearing our destination? Thank you.
He broke the link and waved the luckless Flark and his associate away, then returned to his chair and his book. Eddie edged over. What do you reckon this ugly girl and big bald man are, then?
Dead,
said Charlie, finding his place. At the intersection of corridors on level 8, Zayas stood, listening to the announcement.
The idiots! Why did I ever choose to work with them?
A question I would like answered,
said a voice from the darkness. Pierpoint emerged, his rifle leveled in her direction.
Our arrangement. You have broken it.
She faced him without concern.
I sent you to the ship for your own safety.
Did you?
He came closer.
I played my part. I gave you the Helicon. I've been waiting for you 3 years. Involving the Nisbet brothers was never part of our plan.
She took pleasure in unsettling him.
They were part of the operation from the start. I decided not to inform you that we would be using their mining equipment. I imagined it would displease you. But they are here now, and we will be rid of them soon enough. Essentially, nothing has changed.
Pierpoint lowered the gun slightly.
Perhaps. And the attack on the McConaughey base? The doctor told me of it.
Necessary. I know your caution, Pierpoint. These things had to be done, but you would never have sanctioned them.
She curled the fingers of one hand over the tip of the rifle and angled it downwards.
All will be well soon enough. The Helicon is going to make your ambitions a reality. Remember the demonstration I gave you? The power of Helicon can be yours.
He grimaced.
Why am I still alive, Zayas? What use am I to you now?
You are the only survivor of the raid, Pierpoint, she said. As you will recall, the mining process will take 2 months. As High Archon, your account of events here will be beyond suspicion. In 2 weeks, you will be found aboard the smoking remains of this station as it drifts on the other side of the system. You will report that the Nisbet brothers mounted a raid. Fortunately, you learned the whereabouts of their base on Helta. The police will be tangled up for months in bureaucratic wranglings with the Heltan authorities. Their attentions will never turn to our activities on 11. With your influence, you can make doubly sure of that.
You have staked a good deal on my cooperation, said Pierpoint. And my reward?
Zayas waved a grateful hand.
Unchanged. You will receive half of the activated Helicon, which I will imprint with your personality.
She walked away.
I have your assent? You must see there could be no other way.
Perhaps not. I did not realize you were so resourceful, Zayas.
It is nothing. Now, the doctor. He is the danger now. If he reports to the police, they may move against us before we can extract the Helicon. He must be found
and killed.
He was your prisoner, said Pierpoint. You lost him?
An error that will soon be rectified, she said confidently. I must return to the Nisbet brothers. They must know nothing of your part in this. So drop the gun and play your part well.
In the engine control room, Spigot felt in his pocket for his packet of lights. His fingers closed around an empty box.
Damn it, he snarled. No smokes left. What am I going to do about that K9?
At the base of the console, K9 continued his work.
Ingestion of nicotine substances is harmful.
Shut up. You sound like a state health warning.
Spigot clenched his fists.
I feel so helpless just standing here. But what can I do?
Exercise is recommended to relieve tension,
burbled K9.
The physiology catalog of my databank offers 229 exercise routines for humans. Exercise 1. Stand with feet together and knees slightly bent.
Look, will you give it a rest, all right? Spigot screamed. And I was just beginning to get used to you. Like you even.
Your approval is irrelevant,
said K9, sounding slightly miffed. His voice box emitted a curious groan, and he motored back hurriedly from the console.
Spigot asked, Hey, what's up?
The dog's ear sensors twirled.
I have made an error,
he said.
Please cover your eyes.
The innards of the console revealed beneath the inspection plate fizzed and crackled. Currents of vividly colored static buzzed like angry hornets between contact points, and sparks burst in trails along insulated cables. Levers and switches on the console above started to move of their own accord. A bleeper sounded. The floor beneath Spigot upended and tipped him over face first. K9 skittered across the room.
What have you done?
Spigot demanded as he pulled himself up. The ever-present throbbing note of the engine sounded deeper and discordant. K9 twirled about, sensors and probe extended, absorbing information from all sources.
Regret. Error has been made,
he said.
Linkage ignited has not placed engines in stasis mode. Failsafe mechanism has operated. Engines have stalled.
They've what?
Spigot exclaimed. He hurried over to the small screen that displayed the rock's relative position. Planet 11 was dangerously near, and they were dropping towards it like a stone. We're going to crash down there,
Inevitable,
said K9.
Impact will cause a massive explosion of inflammable gases on the planet's surface.
Spigot felt like tearing his hair out.
So what does that matter to us? At the speed we're dropping, we'll be dead well before that.